Most gardeners plant the same shrubs their neighbors planted 10 years ago, buying whatever the big box store stocks in spring, never knowing that the best new plants sell out at specialty nurseries before the season even starts. What if I told you that 5 brand new shrubs introduced for 2026 are already selling faster than growers can produce them, and the gardeners who move first are getting the best specimens? Welcome to Evergreen Garden. Today we are covering 5 new shrubs for 2026 you need to order before they are gone. Subscribe and let us get into it. 1. Scentara Pura White Weigela, Weigela Florida, Bokrapur. Scentara Pura White is the first weigela in American garden history to deliver genuine, noticeable fragrance alongside the massive spring flower production that makes weigela the most reliable blooming shrub in the country, combining the proven toughness and vigorous flowering form of classic weigela with a sweet, honey-like scent that drifts across the garden and draws pollinators from a distance that no weigela available before 2024 could match. Weigela Florida has been grown in American gardens for over 150 years since plant explorer Robert Fortune introduced it from China and Japan in the 1840s and 1850s, and for all of that time, it occupied a strange position in the shrub garden. It bloomed spectacularly, covered itself in tubular flowers so densely that the foliage disappeared entirely beneath them, tolerated clay soil and cold winters and summer neglect without complaint, and established from new plantings faster than almost any other flowering shrub. What it never had was fragrance. Gardeners who planted weigela alongside lilac or mock orange could smell one and only see the other. Breeders understood for decades that a fragrant weigela would be transformative in the market, but early attempts to cross Weigela Florida with fragrant wild Asian weigela species from Japan and Korea produced plants with either faint scent or poor cold hardiness that limited their usefulness outside mild climates. The Scentara breeding program at proven winners required multiple generations of crossing and back-crossing to isolate the scent gene on a background that retained the full zone hardiness and summer heat tolerance American gardeners require. Scentara Pura White was the first variety to pass commercial trials with consistently strong fragrance ratings across all tested growing regions, from the humid southeast to the dry intermountain west to the cold upper Midwest, marking the first time a truly fragrant weigela with reliable Zone 4 cold hardiness entered mainstream American nursery channels. Research from the Proven Winners Trial Network documented that Scentara Pura White produces measurable volatile floral compounds, primarily benzyl benzoate and linalool, the same aromatic compounds responsible for the characteristic fragrance of jasmine and common lilac, at concentrations detectable at 6 to 8 feet from the plant during peak bloom periods. Pollinator monitoring during multiple trial seasons showed significantly elevated bee and butterfly visit rates compared to non-fragrant weigela varieties growing in the same trial beds under identical conditions. Entomologists documented that hummingbird moths in particular showed a preference for the fragrant Scentara varieties over the standard non-scented weigela controls. The variety also demonstrated measurably superior summer rebloom, initiating a secondary flower flush through July and August without any deadheading required to trigger the repeat cycle, which gives it a longer effective season of interest than any weigela most American gardeners have grown. Plant Scentara Pura White in full sun and well-drained average soil in USDA plant hardiness zones 4 through 8, where it grows as a compact, rounded 4 to 5 foot shrub with a natural vase shape that rarely needs pruning to maintain good form. It blooms heaviest in late spring on old wood, then produces secondary flushes through summer on new growth. No deadheading is required to trigger rebloom, though removing spent flowers speeds up the transition to the next flush. Feed once in early spring with a balanced, slow-release fertilizer before buds break, and prune lightly immediately after the main bloom to shape and encourage fresh branching for the summer rebloom. The white flowers are luminous in evening light, and the fragrance carries particularly well in still, warm evening air, making this an exceptional choice for placement near patios, front entryways, and outdoor seating areas, where the scent can be enjoyed at close range. Specialty nurseries that carried Scentara varieties in their first seasons reported selling out within the first few weeks of availability, and wholesale growers are increasing production significantly for 2026 to try to keep up with demand. For the best selection, check online specialty shrub nurseries in February or March, rather than waiting for local garden centers to stock in April, when the most sought-after sizes are often already gone. This plant pairs particularly well with dark purple companions, like Diabolo ninebark or black mondo grass, where the white blooms and the drifting fragrance create a combination that is as dramatic visually as it is sensory. It also grows well in large containers kept on a covered porch or deck through winter in Zone 5 with minimal protection, giving gardeners in the northern end of its range a way to enjoy the fragrance at close range all season. 2. Invincibelle Limetta, Smooth Hydrangea, Hydrangea arborescens, NCHA 5. Invincibelle Limetta is the smooth hydrangea that produces blooms in a color sequence no hydrangea in American garden history has ever delivered, opening as intense lime green in early summer, shifting through cream and white at peak, then aging to warm blush, and finally to parchment gold before frost, giving a single plant 4 distinct color phases across one season from the same storm-resistant stems that made the Invincibelle line the most structurally dependable hydrangea program ever bred. The Invincibelle breeding program emerged from a genuine structural crisis in the American hydrangea garden. Hydrangea arborescens, the species native to the Appalachian Mountains and moist woodland edges of the eastern United States, produces some of the most spectacular flowers of any deciduous shrub. But the variety that defined its cultivation for decades, Annabelle, has a deeply frustrating flaw. Its stems are thin relative to the enormous weight of its blooms, which can reach 12 inches across and soak up rain during summer storms, turning the entire plant into a collapsed heap within hours of a downpour. Gardeners who planted Annabelle around the country became accustomed to going outside after every summer storm to pick plants back up off the ground. Entire online forums developed around the question of how to stake Annabelle to prevent flopping, with suggestions ranging from tomato cages to elaborate wire support systems. And most veteran Annabelle growers eventually concluded that the staking was simply an annual chore the plant required. The fact that a new hydrangea could have Annabelle-scale flowers on self-supporting stems was, when the first Invincibelle introductions arrived, treated with something close to disbelief by gardeners who had been fighting this problem for decades. Limetta builds on that structural foundation, while adding the unique color dimension that no previous smooth hydrangea offered. The North Carolina State University NCHA breeding program, which stands for North Carolina Hydrangea Arborescens, was specifically designed to eliminate this problem by selecting for dramatically thicker, woodier stem tissue that holds blooms upright through rain, wind, and the accumulated weight of mature flower heads. Multiple seasons of stem strength testing allowed breeders to select plants that retained the spectacularly large flower clusters of the original species while building the structural integrity of a small tree rather than a soft-stemmed perennial. Invincibelle Limetta was the first color break from this program to deliver a completely distinct color identity, the lime to blush to gold progression that distinguishes it from every previous smooth hydrangea in cultivation. Research at North Carolina State University documented that the distinctive lime green color of Invincibelle Limetta at bud stage and early bloom results from high concentrations of chlorophyll in the sepals, the modified leaves that form the visible florets of the hydrangea bloom. As the sepals mature and age, chlorophyll breaks down progressively, while underlying white pigmentation in the cellular tissue becomes dominant, creating the cream to white mid-season color. Anthocyanin accumulation in the aging tissue during the back half of the season then produces the blush tones that develop into warm parchment by fall. The NCHA 5 stem strength protocol confirmed that Invincibelle Limetta stems withstand 40% more lateral force before bending than unimproved Annabelle-type stems, the structural advancement that makes it genuinely practical to grow where the original species would fail. Plant Invincibelle Limetta in full sun to part shade and moist, well-drained soil in USDA zones 3 through 9. It blooms exclusively on new wood produced in the current season, meaning you can cut it back hard in late fall or early spring without losing any blooms. Plants cut to 12 inches in early spring will regenerate to 3 to 4 feet and reach full flower production by midsummer. This completely eliminates the anxiety around pruning timing that frustrates growers of big leaf and mountain hydrangeas, where cutting at the wrong time of year means no flowers for the entire season. Water deeply once per week during the first growing season to establish roots. Then the plant tolerates moderate drought. Deer resistant. Native bees, particularly bumblebees, visit the blooms in numbers that are audible from yards away at peak flower, and the extended season of the 4-phase color progression means this single plant carries visual interest from June through October or later. 3. Quick Fire Fab Panicle Hydrangea. Hydrangea paniculata QFAB. Quick Fire Fab packs the celebrated 6 weeks earlier than any other hydrangea bloom start, the dramatic white to deep raspberry color progression, and the bulletproof cold, heat, drought, and neglect tolerance that made the original Quick Fire one of the best-selling hydrangeas in American history into a 3 to 4 foot frame that fits foundation plantings, container gardens, deck planters, and smaller modern yards that the full-size original simply cannot serve. Quick Fire Original was introduced by proven winners in 2004 and became one of the defining shrub introductions of that decade because it solved the most common and persistent frustration in panicle hydrangea gardening. Standard panicle hydrangeas like Limelight, PG, and Pinky Winky are magnificent plants, but they bloom so late in the season that the garden has already moved past its summer peak by the time they open. Quick Fire initiates flower buds in late spring and is opening white blooms in June, while standard panicle varieties are still weeks away from color, then completes the full dramatic progression from white to cream to pink to deep raspberry before hard frost takes the season. The combination of earliest in-class timing, continuous color change, and absolute hardiness from Zone 3 through Zone 8 made it the dominant panicle hydrangea in American gardens within a decade. The compact Q-Fab selection arose from a natural dwarf plant within the Quick Fire population that showed significantly shorter internode lengths, producing a tidier, more compact habit without any reduction in the flower characteristics or the early season timing that defined the parent. Multiple seasons of trial confirmation established that the compact habit is genetically stable and fully hereditary. Research from trial gardens across the Midwest, Northeast, and Mid-Atlantic documented that Quick Fire Fab maintains bloom initiation at least 42 days ahead of standard Hydrangea paniculata varieties in identical growing conditions within the same trial plots, confirming that the early bloom timing of the parent is fully preserved in the compact form. Studies confirmed that the compact habit resulted from a natural reduction in internode length rather than from chemical growth regulation or rootstock manipulation, which matters because plants purchased in containers and moved to the garden will maintain their natural compact size permanently without any intervention. Trial data also established that bloom density per square foot of plant canopy exceeds the original Quick Fire, making the smaller plant proportionally more floriferous per unit of garden space it occupies, which is the central quality that makes it so valuable in the contemporary, smaller residential landscape. Plant Quick Fire Fab in full sun and well-drained average soil in USDA zones 3 through 8. Its exceptional cold hardiness places it among the most adaptable flowering shrubs available to American gardeners, performing in climates from the upper Midwest and New England to the humid Southeast. It tolerates clay soil and summer heat far better than big leaf or mountain hydrangea types, which makes it a practical choice for gardeners who have struggled with other hydrangea species in less than ideal conditions. Prune in late winter or early spring before new buds break, cutting stems back by 1/3 to maintain the compact form and encourage larger individual bloom size. Dried flower heads left through winter provide visual structure in the dormant garden and support beneficial overwintering insects in the papery bracts. In container culture, a 3-gallon plant placed in a 15 to 18-inch decorative container will produce full-sized flower spikes in its first summer, making it one of the most effective new container shrubs to emerge from any breeding program in recent years. In the garden, the color progression gives you a rough seasonal timeline: white in late June and early July, flushing pink through August, and deepening to raspberry and rose by September. Leaving the dried heads on through winter is not just visually appealing in the snow garden, but measurably beneficial for native bees and wasps that use the dried papery bracts as overwintering habitat. The compact size also makes it an excellent planting partner for ornamental grasses, which fill the early summer gap before quick Fire Fab takes the stage, and together create a mixed planting with interest from April through February. 4. Tiny Wine Gold Ninebark, Physocarpus opulifolius, SMNPOGLW. Tiny Wine Gold Ninebark is the compact native shrub that delivers a dense 2 to 3 foot mound of intensely golden chartreuse foliage, holding its brilliant color from first leaf break through fall frost without burning, fading, or requiring any special soil amendments in a plant that is 100% native to North American stream banks and woodland edges, supports 92 documented native moth and butterfly species, and earns its place as both the most visually striking low shrub in the mixed border and one of the most ecologically valuable plants you can put in the ground. Ninebark, Physocarpus opulifolius, grows wild from Quebec to the Carolinas and west to the Rocky Mountains, and has been documented in American cultivation records as early as the 18th century as a hedgerow and utility plant. The common name references the distinctive bark, which peels away in multiple thin, papery layers throughout the growing season to reveal rich, cinnamon-red inner bark that glows in winter light. As a landscape plant, standard ninebark has always had one serious problem. It grows 8 to 10 feet tall and wide, which makes it unsuitable for most foundation plantings, mixed borders, or smaller modern gardens without the kind of aggressive annual pruning that most homeowners cannot or will not do. Purple-leaved selections like Diabolo and Summer Wine brought ornamental attention to the genus, but they still grew too large for many applications. The Proven Winners breeding program identified naturally compact plants within the native Physocarpus population that also carried an unusual golden foliage trait, the yellow-gold color that is entirely absent from standard green-leaved and purple-leaved ninebark selections. What made the Tiny Wine Gold discovery significant was that the golden foliage does not burn or bleach in full sun, a characteristic that had prevented earlier golden ninebark selections from succeeding commercially, because golden leaves without sun tolerance are only useful in shade gardens, where the color fades anyway. Research from Doug Tallamy's native plant program at the University of Delaware documented that Physocarpus opulifolius supports 92 caterpillar species from native moths and butterflies, placing ninebark in the top tier of native shrubs for habitat value in residential landscapes. The research specifically confirmed that the ornamental colored-leaved selections, including golden-leaved types, retain the full caterpillar hosting capability of the green-leaved wild type, so no ecological function is sacrificed for the ornamental color. This matters because a persistent concern in native plant gardening is whether cultivar selections of native species retain their ecological relationships, and the Tallamy program's data on ninebark is among the clearest answers available for any commonly grown native shrub. Nursery trial data confirmed that the compact habit of Tiny Wine Gold results from a stable genetic dwarfing trait rather than from rootstock influence or chemical growth regulators, meaning landscape plants will maintain their natural 2 to 3 foot size indefinitely. This is a practical detail that matters more than it might seem. Many plants sold at compact sizes in 1-gallon pots grow out to full species size within 3 years in the landscape, requiring removal or constant cutting. Tiny Wine Gold will genuinely stay at the size the label promises across its full lifespan, which means the design effect you plan at the time of planting is the effect you will actually have 5 and 10 years later, without ongoing management intervention to maintain it. Plant Tiny Wine Gold in full sun and moist to well-drained average soil in USDA zones 3 through 8. It tolerates clay soil, periods of wet feet, moderate summer drought once established, air pollution, and road salt spray better than most ornamental shrubs, reflecting the toughness of a species adapted to stream banks and disturbed edges across a wide range of North American climates. Golden foliage color is most intense in full sun and softens to chartreuse in shadier conditions, where it is still attractive but less visually striking. Small pink flowers in late spring attract native bees in significant numbers. Burgundy-tinged seed heads follow the flowers and persist through fall and winter, providing food for overwintering birds and visual interest in the dormant garden. No pruning is needed to maintain the naturally compact mounded habit, which is the single most important practical advantage this plant has over the standard ninebark species that requires constant cutting to keep manageable in a home landscape. 5. Pugster Blue Butterfly Bush, Budellia SMN BDBT. Pugster Blue Butterfly Bush is the compact, sterile-flowered, non-invasive butterfly bush that delivers fragrance and pollinator performance exceeding the standard butterfly bush that dominated American gardens for 30 years, from a plant half the size that blooms continuously from June through hard frost without a break, produces no viable seed to naturalize into wildlands, and comes back reliably from the roots in every zone where Budellia can survive the winter. Standard butterfly bush, Budellia davidii, arrived in Western gardens in the 1890s after British plant collector Augustine Henry sent specimens from central China to Kew Gardens, where the extraordinary fragrance and spectacular late summer bloom immediately attracted commercial nursery interest. American gardeners embraced butterfly bush through the 20th century, and by the early 2000s, it ranked among the 5 best-selling flowering shrubs in the country, prized for its combination of fragrance, late-season color, and the extraordinary pollinator activity it generates on warm summer afternoons. The problem that emerged, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, the Mid-Atlantic region, and parts of the Southeast, was naturalization. Butterfly bush produces very large quantities of light, wind-carried seed, and plants began establishing outside the garden on roadsides, stream banks, gravel bars, and disturbed natural areas, competing with native vegetation in ways that triggered invasive plant listings and regulatory restrictions in several states. This created a genuine dilemma for gardeners who loved the plant but were increasingly concerned about its ecological impact. The Pugster breeding program at Spring Meadow Nursery addressed this at the genetic level by developing sterile flowered cultivars that deliver the full fragrance, pollinator performance of the species while producing no viable seed, eliminating the invasive spread mechanism entirely rather than trying to manage it through cultural practices. The Pugster series name reflects the distinctive, compact, slightly wrinkled bud cluster form that makes these varieties visually different from standard Budellia flower spikes even before the flowers open. Research confirmed that Pugster Blue produces flower spikes 30% longer than standard compact butterfly bush cultivars, with independently documented higher concentrations of nectivorous compounds per individual floret than previous dwarf selections from other breeding programs. Entomological observation trials at multiple sites recorded monarch butterfly, painted lady, tiger swallowtail, spicebush swallowtail, and native skipper visits to Pugster Blue at rates consistently above standard Budellia controls in the same trial plots under identical conditions. Sterility verification testing confirmed less than 0.1% seed viability in harvested fruit from Pugster Blue plants, meeting the threshold adopted by the Pacific Northwest Horticultural Society Invasive Plant Task Force. The combination of invasive safe certification and documented superior pollinator performance opened the plant to gardeners in states where previous butterfly bush selections had been restricted or banned outright, expanding the potential market significantly for the 2026 season. Plant Pugster Blue in full sun and well-drained average soil in USDA zones 5 through 9. In zones 5 and 6, apply a 4 to 6 inch layer of mulch over the base of the plant in late fall to insulate the crown and root zone through winter cold. Cut plants back hard to 6 to 12 inches from the ground in early spring before new growth pushes, as butterfly bush blooms exclusively on wood produced in the current season. The harder you cut it back, the more vigorous the new growth and the longer and fuller the flower spikes will be by summer. Remove spent flower spikes as they fade to maintain the continuous new spike production that keeps the plant in bloom from June through October or later in warm climates. The fragrance is noticeable from 10 to 15 feet on warm afternoons and makes this plant a natural choice for placement near outdoor seating, patios, and garden paths. The long flower spikes also perform exceptionally well as cut flowers, lasting 7 to 10 days in a vase and continuing to open individual florets from the bottom of the spike upward after cutting. Gardeners in Zone 5 and 6 who are nervous about winter survival should know that even if the top growth is killed back to the ground in an exceptionally cold winter, the root system of an established plant is significantly hardier than the top and will regenerate fully in spring. The first season after a killback year actually often produces the heaviest bloom, since the plant pushes a full flush of new growth from an established root system with no old wood competing for energy. Starting plants as a 3-gallon container purchase rather than a 1-gallon will get the root system established enough in the first season that it handles the subsequent winters in stride in most Zone 5 and 6 gardens. And there are your 5 new shrubs to find and order before the 2026 spring season hits full speed. Scentara Pura White, for the first genuinely fragrant weigela ever available to American gardeners. Invincibelle Limetta, for a hydrangea color progression nobody has ever planted before. Fire Fab, for the earliest blooming panicle hydrangea, now in a size that fits any yard. Tiny Wine Gold ninebark, for the golden native that supports wildlife all season. And Pugster Blue, for the fragrant, non-invasive monarch magnet that is finally legal everywhere. These sell out at specialty nurseries weeks before the planting season opens. Order online now, not in April, when the best selections are already gone. Subscribe to Evergreen Garden for more every week. Give this video a thumbs up and tell us in the comments which of these 5 you are ordering first. We will see you in the next one.